Welcome back, everyone, to the Moms Like Me podcast, powered by Support Now. I am thrilled to have the opportunity to interview our next guest, who happens to be in my own community, in my own kahila. It's rare that this happens where there's an overlap between my own community and kind of what I get to do and what we get to do professionally in terms of Support Now. And when I connected the pieces and learned a little bit more about this story, it only felt natural to say, well, we have to bring her on to the podcast to tell more of her story. So I feel super connected to our guest today. She's a cancer survivor, a mom of a special needs child, an incredible individual who will share today her perspective on what it's like to get a cancer diagnosis and everything that transpires after you get that you hear the C word for the first time. So Becky Sernovitz, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Jordan. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Becky, as I mentioned in your intro, you're a mom, you do a lot, you're active. From what I understood or continue to understand about your health journey, you were healthy, you've been healthy, you took care of yourself and you work. You're kind of like I mean this in the most polite way, a typical mom, right? Like we're busy bees. But your life was turned upside down. And I'd love for you to share a little bit more about kind of those first moments where you realized, I don't feel like myself, and talk me through kind of the journey to get to the diagnosis. And then we'll unravel that from there.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. And I think that's a really important part of this that I don't talk a lot about, because so many of us who are working, who have kids, special needs moms, you just sort of power through. And you don't really have time for yourself, and you don't have time to get sick. You can't get sick, right? There's the mom joke of moms are sick and they're still doing laundry and making dinner, etc. But in my case, it got a little bit bigger than just a cold. So it was late January, and I had been at a work event where someone else was sick and a couple of other people had gotten sick. So it seemed pretty typical that in February, I seemed to have some type of bug. I went to my primary care doctor. Nothing came up on tests, right? Viral swabs. I didn't have COVID. I didn't have pneumonia. I didn't have the flu. And they said, let's do antibiotics. Let's do a round of steroids. I would feel better. Steroids are great for temporary feeling good. And then it would come back. So then I went back again, and it was the same. And it wasn't enough to say I need to go to the hospital, but it was something that I couldn't shake, and I wasn't myself. And then things started getting a little weirder. I would say probably late February. I was getting fevers in the middle of the night, but then I wouldn't have a fever during the day, really. Or if I did, it was like a low-grade fever, right? It was 99. So you don't take that as seriously. It wasn't over 100.4. Then my gums started bleeding and swelling. And then I had a tightness in my chest. And all of this I could work through, but it was really the gums that kind of threw me, because it's not like I all of a sudden stopped brushing and flossing. So I went to the dentist, and they said, we don't know what's going on here, but this is not a dental problem. You need to go back to the drawing board and figure this out. So it was at that point that I went back to my primary care doctor and said, we've done all of the other tests. We need to get blood work. And the blood work showed immediately that I had a very elevated white blood cell count and a very low platelets. And I now understand that that just absolutely says leukemia. So I wasn't expecting that at all. Whoever expects that, right? I was expecting maybe like a nice little autoimmune disorder that I could deal with, something along those lines. I will never forget that day. It was a Tuesday. I was working. I was in the grocery store parking lot with my son trying to grab a few things for dinner when my primary care doctor called, and it was after 5 p.m. And so I knew that was not a great sign to begin with. So I stepped outside of the car to take the call, and then things just escalated from there. I was hysterical. I called work. I said, I'm done. I think I have leukemia. Bye. I called my husband. I said, you're coming home. I'm dropping my son off. I said, Sam, I'm dropping Sam off, and I have to go to the emergency room. And I called a friend and said, where do I go to the emergency room for cancer? And she made a call, and she said, Emory. And I called a friend. I have a good friend in our community who is a hematologist oncologist. And I called her and said, what's happening? And she said, where are you going? What emergency room are you going to? I'll meet you. So that was really the first step in my journey of community support, where a friend dropped everything and came with me and sat with me in the emergency room. And she wanted to stay with me until I got a room. At 4 a.m., maybe, I think I said, it's time for you to go. You have to work today. I will be okay. I was in the emergency room. And then I did get transferred from the emergency room at Emory to the leukemia floor. And that was the first time, I think, besides when the doctor's office called, hysterical, but then I had to drive. So, okay, put that aside for now. I have to get myself to the emergency room. And I remember I was in a wheelchair being wheeled from the emergency room to the leukemia floor. And the poor man who was wheeling me, I was bawling. And he was like, "Oh, honey, it'll be okay." I mean, he had no idea what to do with me. So it hit me then. But I had conversations with my friend when we were waiting about how I would need to rely on my strength and my community and my faith, and that I had kids and I have a husband and I have family and I have myself. And I can't just collapse, that I have to get through this. And I kept that message with me.
It's so much easier said than done though, Becky, right? Like I feel that it's easy to say, I have purpose in this. I'm going to rely on all these things. I'm curious to go a level deeper with you. Like what were there any things that you did, like daily habits that you did that allowed you to stay grounded in that? Because like everything, it's easy to say it. It's much harder to actually do it, because I would imagine when you're in that situation, I mean, you started chemo right away. So things are moving really, really quickly. I would imagine you were terrified. So what did you tell yourself? What were some of those practices or habits that you fell into that allowed you to kind of stay above water?
One of the things that I really tried to do was to have a sense of normalcy while in the hospital room. I got dressed every day. I did not sit around in a hospital gown, because then I would just sit there and wallow in a bed in a hospital gown. I got out of bed, besides the fact that they tell you have to get out of bed every day. You can't sit in bed and, deteriorate. I would get in the chair. I would watch TV. I had like kind of schedules of like, okay, from maybe around 9 to 11, I'd watch Golden Girls. And then I'd go get myself some tea room. And then I'd switch to Netflix and I'd do that. And then I'd read for a little. And someone came to visit me almost every day. So I really tried to break my day up into chunks so that I wasn't just sitting there thinking, wow, I'm just sitting here in hospital room. It's funny, it did take me a long time to actually read a book. I feel like my brain wasn't ready to start reading yet in the beginning, that I kind of needed more distraction than that. And I watched a lot of TV, which worked. And
It's like you needed the stimulation to keep your mind, like a book, like it would slow down your mind too much where you would wander. So you
too
needed
much.
the like extra
Yes.
stimulation almost. Interesting.
Yes. I have never been one to meditate or sit with my thoughts, and this was not the time to start.
Yeah.
So I did not rely on that. I walked in a hospital as much as I could. I tried to focus on, I have a job to do, which is to get better. They'll do the chemo, right? The hospital will take care of what I can't do, but I need to do everything I can do. And part of that was not getting depressed and not getting weak because I wasn't eating, and not getting sad because I was just sitting around alone. So people came to visit. And there were some sad moments while I was in the hospital. Unfortunately, it was my daughter's bat mitzvah, and I did not get out of the hospital in time. So we made the best of it. My parents brought my dresses from home, and I did not wear the large ball gown that I was planning, but I had bought a gold dress just to wear to other people's barn bat mitzvahs. I wore that. I had friends come sit with me during the bat mitzvah so that I wasn't sitting in my room alone watching my daughter's bat mitzvah on a screen. It wasn't perfect, but I made the best of it. And I was proud to see her and my family celebrating her. And that was very important to me, that the rest of my family not feel this doom and gloom because I was in the hospital, that they still had celebratory things going on in their lives that we needed to celebrate.
So this part made me cry when we first talked, because it's such a joyous, momentous moment for your daughter, for your family, and the timing, as you mentioned, didn't align. It didn't work, and it would have been very dangerous. Dangerous is an aggressive word, but just given how immunocompromised you were, to just be so close to so many germs and potential, like it wasn't in the cards for you. You said something to me the first time we spoke that I loved, that you set up like a computer, or was it like a FaceTime, so that people could also say hello to you? Tell us about that.
Yes. So first I was on a big screen during the actual service at the synagogue. So there were times when I had my part, like we were doing a blessing, and I wrote a little speech for her. So I was on the big screen during the actual bat mitzvah, and a friend said there was not a dry eye in the house.
I can't
And
even imagine.
yeah, so that I almost felt like, I don't know, we lived through Zoom bar bat mitzvahs. Like that felt, okay, we can do this. Then when we transitioned to the party, I did get a little more sad, because I said, this is my party. But what can you do? So they had me, our event planner was amazing, and she had an iPad dedicated just for me. And so I was on the iPad the entire evening. So like when my daughter went up in the chair, she went up a second time, and she brought me in the iPad so that it was me going up in the chair. And so the iPad would be passed around. so that I talked to my friends. And although I was immunocompromised and not allowed out, even though I tried, and I practically tried to bribe the doctors to just like look the other way while I hopped in a cab, ran to the bar mitzvah and came back, that didn't work. I did have a lot of out-of-town friends who would come in, and we kind of made a schedule in the hospital so that not too many people came at one time. But I did get to see a lot of the friends who had come to the bar mitzvah. So, we made, I think I titled my Instagram post at the time, like making lemonades from lemons.
Yeah. How did your daughter handle that weekend? Was she emotional about it? Did she feel, maybe was she just over functioning in the moment? What was her response?
She was happy. She was excited for her bat mitzvah, and that's how we knew it was the right decision not to postpone it. She was not sad. She knew I was there with her. I was on the iPad when they were getting their makeup done. I was there for the whole party. And she said something to my husband at one point, not related to the bat mitzvah, but just kind of our perspective overall, that she said, I know mommy's sick, but I also know she's going to get better, so I'm not worried. And that was what we tried to instill in them, that this is a period where I'm going to be sick, but this is not something to be scared about or sad about. And that really kind of permeated throughout my time away from them.
Becky, I also want to continue down your medical health journey. So you mentioned, you got to Emory, you immediately moved to the cancer floor, the leukemia floor. You started your induction chemo, it sounds like almost right away. What happened after that? What did the doctors find? What did they recommend? What was your path like from there?
Sure. So my path was never 100% clear, unfortunately, when we got back all of the testing because of my genetics, meaning like the various mutations that I have. Even people with acute myeloid leukemia, I have AML or had AML. Everybody has different genetic mutations within there. And those various genetic mutations make up your level of risk in terms of relapse. And that determines whether or not you head down the path of a bone marrow transplant. So mine at Emory, they were not 100%. They didn't come in saying, there's no question, we're doing a month of induction and then you're getting chemo. Nor did they say bone marrow transplant does not make sense for you at all. They were somewhere in the middle, and they said, let's wait and see what happens after chemo, after the month. You do induction chemo, which is about a week, 14 days, I think. And then you're in the hospital until your cells recover. And then you do other rounds of chemotherapy outpatient. So during that time, I decided that it was wise to seek a second opinion. Emory is a wonderful hospital. It is not the #1 hospital for cancer. So I went to MD Anderson, the #1 hospital for cancer. So I went to Houston and got a second opinion. And they were definitively 100% you should get a bone marrow transplant, not wavering, not saying, let's wait and see what happens with your counts. So both are valid approaches. The MD Anderson doctor said, if we had 10 doctors in here, 5 would say you should have a bone marrow transplant and 5 would say you don't need one. But I'm saying you do. And I would rather do that than wait around and see what happens, because waiting around and seeing what happens would have meant waiting around to see if I relapsed.
Wow.
So we pretty much decided then and there, sounds good, we'll do the bone marrow transplant. And then I met with the transplant doctor at MD Anderson, who I happened to get assigned to the head of the department. And she convinced me that if you're going to get a transplant and you logistically can do it here, why wouldn't you do it here? So we worked it out. We called my parents. We said, can we do this? Huge talk about support, by the way. My parents, in their early 80s, my father moved with me to Houston, and my mother moved in with my husband and children while I was in Houston for 5 months. So had we not had that level of support, it's truly amazing. Had we not had that level of support, I would have had the transplant at Emory. But we were lucky that this worked out and that my parents are healthy. So this is a good advertisement for staying healthy into your 80s. And I had the transplant in October 15th. It is my celliversary. And then you stay near the hospital for 100 days. So you have to be within a half an hour of the hospital for 100 days post-transplant, because those are your most at-risk days of getting what is known as graft versus host disease, where your cells would see the host cells, the donor cells, as foreign and attack them. And that can come with a whole host of problems. So luckily, I did not experience any serious graft versus host. So I waited out my time in Houston, and then I came back.
Wow. How did you feel? Like, what were the side effects of that process? Like, it sounds so scary. Like, was it painful?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's funny. The actual transplant itself is like nothing. It's, I think it was 3 bags of red blood cells, and they just went in like any other blood transfusion. And that was that. So the day of, I felt fine. Unfortunately, that night I developed a fever. It could have been from the transplant. It could have been something entirely different. So the first 4 to 5 days after the transplant were probably my worst because of the fever. After that, it's just kind of a strange level of fatigue that was worse than the chemo, because the chemo is kind of short, like your cells go down, you're tired, you're fatigued, but then they come back up. I actually reacted very well to chemo, so I was very lucky in that sense. So the
Yeah.
bone marrow transplant, I was just spent. I didn't have energy. I didn't really have an appetite. There were some
Yeah.
things that hurt, so I dealt with some pain medicines. But I was only in the hospital for about 2.5 weeks post-transplant. And then basically they had said, once you can be not on IV painkillers, you can go back to your apartment. So that was my goal. And I went back to the apartment. And then it was just a matter of trying to make sure that I ate enough. Sometimes 3 small meals equaled what used to be a meal, but it was something.
Yeah.
And that I walked. And luckily I was in Houston. So it was December. It was like in the 70s.
Yeah.
So I was able to
You get
walk.
out. Yeah. One
Yes.
thing that I keep coming back to that is so beautiful to me, and I recognize it's easy for me to say this, but how beautiful and magical in some ways that you had that time with your parents at 82 and 80. And it's such a reminder that moms and dads, parents, like you never stop being parents. Like it is your responsibility, your obligation, your the greatest blessing to like keep caring for your children. And while this is the most extreme
Absolutely.
example and like the worst of it, I can't help but like look at that and say, wow, like what
It's
a
true.
moment. Do you think
Right.
about that? Do you reflect on that?
Absolutely. And there was never a situation where my father and I lived in an apartment together for 5 months. And that's, we had a 1-bedroom apartment. He took the sofa bed. When I was in the apartment, I had the bedroom with the 2 beds and he had the sofa bed. He is a selfless as man as they come. And I don't want to get in trouble. My mother turns 80 next week. So she's
Okay,
79.
wait, I don't want to cross a Jewish mama, so
I don't know. And amazing that they both just picked up their lives. And then my mother was able to live here with my 3 chaotic children, and son-in-law and mother-in-law lived together in harmony for 5 months. The whole thing was just really a blessing. And absolutely. And my father and I talked about things that we hadn't really talked about, because when do we ever just sit around the 2 of us talking?
Yeah, it's so hard as adults, like as adult moms, to have quality one-on-one time with your parents. It's so rare. It's
Yes,
so
it
rare. And of
is.
course, the diagnosis and everything you're going through, I would imagine just takes it a layer deeper because there's just a level of appreciation from both of you, both from an age perspective from him, from a diagnosis perspective. And I feel like it's so easy to look at time with your parents and as like so linear, like up, you're in the
Hmm.
house for a certain amount of time and then you do your own thing and then you become parents and just kind of you naturally kind of those just conversations drift off and they change. But for you, you had this like spike. You had this like moment where
Yeah,
it's almost you revert back into the childhood version of yourself, but with an adult perspective. And
right.
I just would imagine you cherish that so much. And
I
it's a
did.
beautiful
And I
thing.
have to say, I think a lot of women are closer with their mothers, right? When my parents live in Philadelphia, we're down here in Atlanta. So when I call, my father would usually say hello and we'd talk for a little bit, and then he'd be like, okay, here's your mother. And then
Yeah.
she and I would, talk. And so that changed. And that I didn't have a lot of time or energy or interest in talking on the phone while I was away. So a lot of times she just got what was going on through him. And so their roles shifted a little bit in terms of my relationship with
Wow.
them.
Wow. What an
Yeah.
opportunity. What an opportunity.
Yeah.
So Becky, you talk about some of the side effects, the fever, the fatigue, the appetite. How do you feel today? What is like a day in a life like for you now?
Yeah. I have to say, it's still almost an out of body experience, that my body is just not what it used to be.
Mm.
Overall, I am healthy, right? I mean, the biggest thing is I don't have cancer. That's huge, and that cannot be undervalued. But there are times when I get pretty upset that I'm not who I used to be. And I know that I'm only 6 months out, but I think it's hard on especially high functioning people, right? I worked full time. I had 3 kids, as you mentioned. My older son has different needs. I was go, go, go all the time. I would wake up at 5:15 in order to get on that Peloton before everybody else woke up. And I ran half marathons. And yesterday I took my dog for a walk. I have a loop where it's about 0.8 miles. So we were walking, and I decided to see what would happen if I ran from one mailbox to the next mailbox. And I did it. And it was a slow jog. My dog was like, "Oh, we're running." And she picked up on the fact that it was a little faster. And I did it. And I did one mailbox to the next. And then I waited a few mailboxes and then I did another one. And so on the one hand, that's amazing. And I'm so proud of myself that I got my legs to move in that way. And then you could say, well, but I missed a half marathon that I had signed up for. How was this?
Yeah.
I have a long way to go for that. I am not, I think as many of us are, very good at giving myself grace. So it has been hard for me to be in this body that does not feel like mine. I get hot and my skin gets really prickly. That's weird. That didn't used to happen. I'm still pretty fatigued. I wake up in the morning to help get the kids out of the house. And, we have 2 kids go one way and 1 kid goes the other way. And then some days, a lot of days, I'll just get back in bed for an hour because it's early and my body's not ready to function yet at that hour. So I take it easy and I try to give myself grace that I'm 6 months out and that they say it takes about a year to get back to your full energy level. One doctor said something to me at one point in the hospital. I was out of the hospital. I had to go in for something was bothering me and I had to go into the urgent care. And she said, I don't think that transplant doctors do a very good job of letting you know that our job is not to make you who you used to be. It's to make you not have cancer. And I said, okay. So I have that in the back of my mind, but I also don't want to let that dictate who I am. So it's a really hard balance.
That's a really interesting reframe, just in general, too. Like these doctors are there to cure your disease. It's to try to rid your body of this awful thing that's trying to do this terrible thing to you. And that doesn't always mean, and I think that's also a really good reframe for supporters, for people that love you and are supporting you throughout this journey, that just because you are cancer free, that doesn't mean that like suddenly you're just, I'm back. It's a really important reminder, even as I think about people that I've known and supported, that we're so quick to grasp to the good news. Oh, she's good now. Great. Let's move on.
Back to normal. Yeah.
Back to normal, right. And it's not that simple. It's such a blessing. It's such an incredible miracle that you're here and you are doing well. And you can still almost like grieve the version of yourself that you once knew. And I'm sure there is moments of just fear of like, can I ever get back to that? Knowing
Big
what you're
time.
capable of and knowing what you want to accomplish in this life. Your life is not meant to be defined by I survived cancer and this is now the remnants of Becky, right? You want to be like a better version of yourself, right? You want to go through that
Right.
full metamorphosis, and that takes time, or it will just simply always look different, which I think is,
Right.
again, a very important reframe, not just for you, but for people that know and love you and want to support you, to realize that this journey is not over, even though the
Right.
cancer
It's
has
true.
successfully out of your body.
Right. Very true. And even when I'm still a little immunocompromised, when that starts coming back and I start going places without masks, there'll still be, hope each week, each month, hopefully I get better, but who knows where
Yeah.
I'll be.
Yeah.
I hope to be running a half marathon one day. And if I don't, so maybe I'll walk a 5K.
Right. So one of the things you touched on earlier that I think is important, you talk about how you really only cried in the wheelchair and it really never occurred to you to wallow. Can
Mhm.
you explain a little bit more about that? Because again, as an outsider, when you hear someone has cancer, you think, how could they, how are they doing? I couldn't function like that.
Right.
Explain from your perspective what it's like to
Yeah.
actually have that diagnosis and what that actually means.
I think I will say I probably had some pretty good training with my son, that our son was born and we were not aware that there was going to be any difficulties, and he ended up having a Jewish genetic disorder that unfortunately was not picked up on in testing. And we had no choice. We had to figure out what was going on. We eventually got to his diagnosis, but before that, we had some pretty rough patches. And we had this baby, and he needed to be fed, and he needed to sleep, and we needed to eat. And so we couldn't just sit there. And then when the diagnosis came, I was very sad, but then he was still there, ready to eat and ready to, live. And so, it's funny. I had dealt with a little bit of anxiety previously, and ironically, it did not come back at all with my son's diagnosis. And I always kind of likened it to, well, I didn't really have time for that. I
Yeah.
couldn't be like, oh God, I'm so worried. And what's going to happen? who could do that and take care of a baby that had additional needs? And I felt like that version kind of came back. Like, well, I could sit around and I could become anxious about the what ifs, and I could be sad that I'm sitting here in a hospital, or I could say, well, that's not really going to serve my purpose right now. And it just, I honestly, I don't even feel like I struggled with it. I just said, I'm going to make the best of this, and I have to. I can't, it would be so much worse if my children had seen me kind of fall apart and like not take care of myself, not be able to FaceTime with them and not be present for them. I honestly, I don't even feel like I made that conscious of a choice. It just happened. It helped that my community came out. I have a good friend whose daughter had leukemia. So when we were in the emergency room, I called her and was like, what am I doing? What's happening? Like, what are we going to do? It's very different, pediatric and adult, but still.
Sure.
And she was like, okay, I'm on it. And my room had all of these pictures. She printed out all of the school pictures that go online, and they're like, please buy this mug with your child's artwork on it. We printed out all of those, and they were all over my room. And I had carpets, and I had slippers, and I had robes, and people brought sound machines. And, we made it as much of a home as possible. And I think the support of my friends, we did use Support Now. We advertised, please help the nurses. So people would sign up for slots to bring nurses cookies and pizza and things like that. And there was just this swell of, you're going to get through this. We all have you. And there really wasn't a choice to do anything otherwise.
Wow. Becky, you're amazing. Before we part, I'm just curious, any like lasting piece of advice for someone that might have just gotten a diagnosis like leukemia, or someone who finds themselves supporting a friend who just gets a major diagnosis? Is there one piece of advice that stands out that you would want to share beyond what you've already done?
Right. I'm probably going to go with maybe 3. So
Go
I
for
think
it.
one of them is for just normal person in terms of women's health, and especially women of a certain age. As we hit our 40s, things start to get weird anyway. Don't let somebody tell you, oh, it's just a virus. Oh, it's just allergies. You advocate for yourself and for your own health. Only you know if something isn't right. So, I've done that with my child, and now I've done it with myself. And so I think that's a very important lesson from all of this that I had to learn the hard way. I learned it once. I didn't really need to learn it again, but that's fine. And then I think in terms of support, whatever you want to do. People sometimes are like, what's the best thing for my friend who just got diagnosed with cancer? It doesn't matter. I got duplicates of some things. I got things that I got books that maybe I didn't want to read. I didn't care. I'll read them eventually. My family loves now that we have a couple of different blankets that we can use. Just be there and be supportive. And you can also ask, how can I help in terms of maybe, can I bring dinner, or can I do this, right? Kind of just the how can I helps. Don't put it on the person to have to do that. Take it upon yourself. If it's not perfect, it'll still be appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah. Becky Sernovitz, you're amazing. I feel so lucky to have had the opportunity to meet you, albeit not in circumstances that I think you or me would have ever wanted. And it's a beautiful thing for you to be able to share this with me, with our community. I've learned a great deal from this conversation, and I'm very confident this will touch a number of listeners that might find themselves in a similar situation. So thank you for your transparency, and I'm so glad that you are on your way. I realize what you said. It's not over. It's not done. You're not back 1,000%, but you look great, and you sound like you are in the right headspace to be back to the person and to the mom that you want to be. And I am grateful that I get to be in a community where I can keep my eye on you and hear from you. Thank you also
Thank
for
you.
choosing Support Now to help rally your community, our community. It's been a wonderful opportunity for us as well.
Really was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.